A group of high-profile lawyers, doctors and former premiers are calling for the decriminalisation of recreational drugs. They argue that police are wasting valuable resources chasing after drug users. But the Prime Minister and the Attorney-General are not keen to support a controversial rethink of drug laws, as John Stewart reports.
Every week, police use sniffer dogs to patrol train stations and streets. Those arrested are often caught with small amounts of drugs.
Just keep walking.
For the Foreign Minister, it's a personal issue. Senator Carr's brother died of a heroin overdose, and when he was New South Wales Premier, Australia's first supervised injecting room was set up in Sydney's King's Cross. Senator Carr is now calling for a rethink about decriminalising some illicit drugs.
We've got to be taking police resources away from chasing people into nightclubs in the hope of finding ecstasy in their pockets, and having police and sniffer dogs at railway stations trying to catch people with small individual quantities of marijuana. It's not an appropriate use of police time, and police time is very, very expensive.
Today, a group of high-profile Australians produced a report which aims to open debate on drugs and make politicians consider changing criminal laws. Mick Palmer is a former federal police chief and says despite the best efforts of police across the country, the war against drugs is failing.
My comment is that probably police are more effective now than they've ever been and becoming increasingly more sophisticated and skilled, but at the end of the day, we don't make very much difference. Arguably we don't make any.
The former New South Wales Director of Public Prosecutions, Nicholas Cowdery, wants illicit drugs to be regulated and even taxed.
We have two very potent drugs, alcohol and nicotine. They are legalised, regulated, controlled and taxed. And so my proposal, and this is my own personal proposal, is that all other drugs should be treated in the same way.
The report's authors want politicians to consider decriminalising marijuana and for heroin to be legally prescribed for addicts. But the Prime Minister is not convinced.
I'm not in favour of decriminalisation of any of our drug laws. We want to keep supporting people who need our help to break out of a cycle of addiction.
The Attorney-General is also unenthusiastic about drug reform.
But I think we need to tread extremely carefully in this area. There's a very high threshold, I think, that has to be passed before we look at decriminalising particular illicit drugs.
Can I say as the Chief Minister, it won't be happening on my watch.
But those calling for a new approach to illicit drugs are convinced there is room for politicians to move, even among Conservatives.
And I've personally noticed within Liberal and Conservative circles a much broader and a much more accepting and much more interest in drug reform along a wide variety of lines.
The New South Wales Police Commissioner says his officers will uphold the laws of the state, and illicit drugs aren't the only challenge for those on the front line.
The illicit drug problem is an enormous draw on resources, but by comparison to the resources that we have to put into dealing with alcohol-related crime, it fades away into insignificance. The reality is it's people not acting responsibly, whether they're pouring alcohol down their throat or whether in fact they're taking drugs.
The report also points out that illicit drugs are a major source of income for organised crime groups, and decriminalising some drugs could remove large sections of the black market. John Stewart, Lateline.